Go. Yep, there it is. And we are live and ready to go. So let's kick things off. So folks, welcome to the Best Practice of Website User Flow. This is the second of 3 of our website design focused episodes in our 2022 Best Practices series. My name is Spencer. I am the Director of Client Experience here at Keystone Click. And if you're frequent at these webinars, you've probably recognized me before because this is probably my favorite part of my job. Erin, why don't you introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. Hello, everyone. My name's Erin Jordan. I'm an assistant account manager here at Keystone Click.
Yep. And before we pop into it, a bit about Keystone Click. We are a strategic digital marketing and web design development firm agency located in the 3rd Ward of Milwaukee, Wisconsin. We really focus on building research-based marketing strategies and using that to implement whatever tactics help you best reach your audience and grow your digital presence. And Erin, anything you'd like to add to that before we pop into this?
No, I think that was a great summary. So let's kick this off.
Perfect. I'm going to start things off with Erin on covering what we're going to tackle today.
Yeah, for sure. So today, what the heck are we talking about? We're talking about user flow. So we'll go through a little bit about what user flow is, going about defining your audience, some CRO. Then we're going to get into actually, how maybe you'd create your user flows, how to start out that process, what tools maybe are available to you in your toolbox. And finally, we're going to touch on landing pages and a little bit about the distinction between user flows for campaigns versus, your overall user flow.
For sure. So before we get into the meat of the presentation, just a bit on what we have already covered and kind of how it ties into today's presentation. So the online customer journey, that's what this is all about. And today we're going to be covering, how you can use your website to optimize your user flow to better help your ideal customers, site visitors, go along that journey and move along those stages quicker. So really what we're looking at here is just the entire path of your consumer throughout all their digital touch points, especially today on the website. So first time visitors being that awareness stage, maybe that's their second time, maybe they follow you on social media, then they'd be in that consideration and just really guiding them along that until they are loyal or advocates of your brand. So that's a bit about the online customer journey. And then once again, tying the website back in. So helps you get found. That comes into SEO, but making sure that you're active throughout your entire digital presence so people are finding you. Building that trust, that goes back to our webinar we did on credibility. How can you continue to show that case that you're the expert, whether it be through content, testimonials, case studies, reviews, so on and so forth. Educate. Everyone likes to be educated on different topics and really showcasing your expertise, whether it be through blogging, webinars like you're here today to check out, or any white papers. Those are another great way to add educational content to your website. Informing folks about the latest trends, news, what's going on, any updates, so on and so forth. Nurture, people are going to come back to your website more than once, lots of time before deciding to take that next step. So really just making sure that you're always there, creating great content, that your website's easy to use, navigate, so on and so forth. And last but not least, convert. As we say, your website is your 24/7 salesperson. So it needs to be optimized to always drive folks to that conversion. So few more slides that I'm going to be covering or that we have covered. So quick touch on primary, secondary call to action. So your primary call to action really is going to tie back into user flow, and that is the action you want to your site visitor to take. So it's definitely going to be the most prominent on your website. It leads to that desired action that really helps achieve your end user's goal, and it takes them towards that next step towards conversion. So secondary call to actions can be looked at, it's a bit of a detour. It's less prominent. Maybe they don't want to take that next step right away. Still guiding that along that journey, taking them to maybe it's a blog, maybe it's a resource, maybe it's a case study, just really providing an alternate option for them to take but still leaving that goal there, leaving them the option to complete that goal that they want to accomplish by coming to their website. Moving on, last but not least, before we move into things about user flow, but for every call to action, it needs to serve a purpose. It needs to define the purpose as well. So it needs to tell them exactly what's going to happen. If it's not clear what's going to happen when someone clicks on the call to action, if it's not explicitly said in the text, so you've got book your appointment, it's got to be obvious what's going to happen when someone clicks that. Is it interesting or interactive? We're going to get into that a bit here today. Does it invite users to click through? That gets back into the interesting, interactive type aspect, really encouraging people, showcasing the benefit of what that call to action does. Creating a sense of urgency is always positive, especially if they are campaign related, and ensuring that it appears more than once. And then this can be more than once throughout your website, obviously, but also can appear more than once on one specific page. People aren't always going to click it the first time they see it. So ensuring that that primary call to action is placed elsewhere on the page. So that's a bit on what we've covered so far. So I'm going to pass it back off to Erin here.
Yeah, absolutely. And you'll notice as we go through, we're definitely going to be referencing some of that content from the previous webinar, which is why Spencer gave such a great recap in the beginning. I think, calls to action, as you'll see, are really important in terms of highlighting user flow, but let's actually get into a little bit of what user flow is. So user flow, to just give you a definition there, is an outline of every step a user takes to complete a specific task or action. And I really like this analogy that, if you think of your website, your company's website, as a city, then user flow is essentially like a map of directions to a specific location. And it's a clearly defined route, and it's an efficient route to get to that place, and that's your goal. And user flow is a little bit different than user journey. Spencer was talking about the customer journey. The thing about customer journey is that it accounts for all the different places that someone may find you online, but user flow is really tied to your website and the type of actions that somebody takes on your website to ultimately feed back into that journey. So I have this meme too. It's like, if you could follow directions, that would be great. But the most important part of user flow is that you give those clear directions to your audience. And so let's talk about a little bit why user flow is so important. I think one of the biggest things is that, users' needs, and identifying your users' needs, and then seeing where they overlap with your business goals. I mean, that's something that is really helpful overall, but you're really identifying, how your website is built in a way that helps your target audience the most, which I think is really powerful. In mapping your user flow, it's important that, you catch maybe some potential problems and be able to correct and reduce friction. And by friction, I mean when a user may encounter an experience that causes them to drop off and not connect with you or fill out your contact form because they can't find your contact form, or they're coming to your website and they don't understand what you do. And if you don't explain that or give them ample opportunity to understand your business, then, they're not going to say right away, oh, I'm ready to give you a call and become a customer right now. So it's really about, reducing those points of potential friction. Ultimately, it helps you improve your sales funnel. As Spencer said, your website is your 24/7 salesperson, and it needs to clearly help guide users down your funnel. But ultimately, you're just demonstrating that you really understand your audience and can present the information up front that they're looking for. And we've talked so much about audience, and certainly, your audience ties into your user flow really heavily because that flow is designed with the user in mind. So one of the first steps in taking a look at user flow or improving your user flow is defining your audience. And so when we talk about developing your own customer persona, we often the example we give is, a concrete example of who you imagine is your ideal customer, including all the basics of, demographic information. You've imagined maybe some of their outside interests and hobbies, etc. But for really your website and focusing on user flow, there's a couple of things you want to pay attention to, and that's really ultimately your audience's goals, wants, and needs, and also some of their frustrations too, because again, if that user flow creates frustration, if it's not a positive experience for them, that doesn't help you, that hinders you in your business goals. So obviously understanding what frustrations they may encounter, and it may be that they don't like a bunch of text. So offering them a video on your website that's clear and upfront, that may be a better explanation that resonates with them, and then they understand your business and are incentivized to do what comes next. And so we're going to get into some more tools for your toolbox as well, but A/B testing is really tied into understanding your audience from a perspective of pushing one variable at a time and seeing what they prefer in terms of design, in terms of where you've structured your content, things like that. A/B testing can be a great tool off the bat to creating that larger picture of your target audience. And finally, in talking about some fundamentals, we would be remiss without talking about conversion rate optimization. So conversion rate or conversions are typically your goal for your website. Your own goal is to increase business, and whatever that conversion looks like, whether it be, again, giving you a call, filling out a contact form, signing up for a webinar, having those conversions identified is one thing. But when we talk about conversion rate optimization, we're really talking about optimizing your site based on user behavior. And it's largely driven by data, this idea of designing a website with optimization and user flow in mind. But it's also driven by your gut, because likely if you look at your website right now and pretend you're a potential customer, and you go into it and you find that you can't find the information you're looking for, or the buttons don't really make sense, those call to actions don't really make sense, then if it's not going to work for you and you already know about your business, then it doesn't work for your potential customers as well. So that's a good kind of self-indicator too of whether or not the website's going to work for your users.
For sure. And evaluating your current state, as Erin was getting into, is definitely the first step in optimizing that user flow. So seeing where it is now, if you also, is it like, as Erin was mentioning, if you go in and try it on your own, is your website's flow functioning how you would like to, or have someone else do it, ask someone else to test their website, see where they get to. Now, there are a lot of ways to check out your current state when it comes to that. So now we're going to talk about some tools you can use for actually optimizing your website's user flow. So Erin mentioned this earlier. We're going to mention it again. Understanding your audience, understanding your user is the first step to creating an amazing user flow. So when they get to your website, you really want to put yourself in their shoes. What is their goal when they get to your website? What problem do you solve? What solution do you provide them with? So identify that. And then it's important to understand how maybe did they get to your website? And that really gets into entry pages, which we're going to talk to in a bit. But most of the times people are going to enter on your homepage, but some of the time they're going to be clicking onto a piece of content on your website from social media. So understanding how people may have got to that part in your website really helps you outline what next step to offer. Another question or another thing to think about here is any questions that they may have about your offering and what information do they need to move on to that next stage. And as mentioned before, creating a customer journey along with the persona are going to be extremely helpful with you defining your audience to understand truly what they're looking for when they come to your website. So that second step coming up is identifying your most important pages. And while this might seem obvious, for most companies, it's product or service pages, or perhaps a contact us page. These are really the pages that are going to be related to that goal that your end user has. So they're related to the problem that they have that you help solve. And those are the pages you really want them to go to, because we mentioned the customer journey. Those are the pages that are going to help boost them along towards that conversion, and make it easier to identify next steps, so on and so forth. So pages that are directly in reference to not only the end user's goals, but also your goal as a business are definitely going to be some of those most important pages. And at the end of the day are going to be that final act you want site users to take. So screenshot there of all of our service pages. We offer many different services. And for us, it would come down to, are all of those important, or maybe do we want people to be contacting us? Those are just questions that we ask internally when it comes to our own user flow on our website. Moving on, so visualizing your flow. So really before making any changes on your website to whether it be call to actions, navigation, so on and so forth, which we're going to get into as well, really want to visualize your flow just in the form of a chart, essentially, or a diagram. So first things first, identify your entry point. And as I mentioned before, there are tons of different places where people could be entering your site. For now, just to get started, focus first on your homepage. When someone gets on your homepage, what is that ideal step you would like them to take? And then maybe use, as you're outlining, use different elements, to outline different steps. So maybe as this example on the right, they've got, here's where they enter, and then they enter to the homepage, and that's a rectangle. Then they've got an arrow, and then use something different to signify a call to action. And then your final step is to close that loop once the intended task has been completed, and really to try to keep it as simple as possible. Obviously, people aren't going to take that desired first step every single time. And that kind of just goes into mapping out your whole flow as you get more in depth going further. If they click onto a resource page instead, how can you get them back to that user flow, to that desired outcome? And we're going to be covering that here again once we get to entrance pages as well. Some tools that you are really useful in terms of mapping out your flow. Tool one, and Aaron is going to kill me if I say this wrong. This is Miro, right, Aaron?
Miro, yeah.
Oh, all right. I used to say Miro. Aaron told me it was wrong, But yeah, it gives you, so this is a free service. It allows you to create, got examples down there. Tons of different little charts, visual diagrams, so on and so forth. I'm going to throw the link in the chat here quick. But here's kind of an example right here of what a potential user flow would look like. So, and this kind of goes into, they might take a different step. So there are two different pathways that they can take. But, first things first, you can picture this as they get to your homepage, then they have a decision. Maybe it's they click on this page or they click on that page. But at the end of the day, it really maps into this end result. So that's just an example that you can use. Another is called SlickPlan. This is one that I kind of toyed around with and found pretty useful. It functions very similarly to how Miro does, but really just comes down to user preference. And I will also throw that into the chat. So Those are two really great online tools. I will say one benefit to Miro is that it allows for collaboration within your team. So multiple people can look at it as opposed to just one person looking at it all the time. So Miro is definitely the more collaborative of the two tools. And we actually use it quite a bit at Keystone Click when it comes to mapping out user flows for websites we're developing. So that's a little fun fact right there. So now we're going to get into how you can influence that user flow or optimize it on your own site. So back to call to actions. I know that we had covered it a bit at the beginning in the recap, but this is taking it to that next level. So alert colors and call to actions, using those effectively. When it comes to call to actions, it's crucial that the color of your call to action contrasts with the background. So regardless of whatever color you choose, whatever shape or call to action you choose, the color really needs to pop. So typically some of those colors that are more eye popping are going to be those red, green, blue, oranges, some of those brighter colors, but really ensure that it's not getting lost in the background of your screen. That's of your page, I should say. That's really everyone's worst nightmare, especially from a user perspective, because if they can't immediately identify where that next step is via the call to action, that is where they could hit a dead end, and we want to avoid that. So next is keep it consistent to your brand. So really try to identify a color that you're going to be using throughout your site that maybe is related to your brand. So I know at Keystone Click, we've got a color palette, excuse me. And one of those colors is going to be our most frequently used call to action colors. So that kind of goes back into keeping your call to actions colors consistent and the same throughout the site. One thing I will say is on occasion that especially when it comes to primary and secondary, try to always keep your primary the same color and keep your secondaries the same color. Really just to keep that consistency so you're not fluctuating throughout the site. And here's a little example of something we're going to get to in a bit, but this is a heat map of where people are clicking. So you can kind of get an idea of, it's right away on Netflix. Once they get to it, their eyes get drawn to the middle of the screen. What's right next to the middle of the screen? It's that big header, and then it's that call to action. So right away, those are the most frequently clicked on parts of their site because they do use that super contrasting and simple call to action right away. Moving on. So something fun you can do to influence what decision people on your website or visitors on your website are going to use is through animation. So in this case, imagine you're on someone's navigation and you mouse over services, and that little button changes colors or shades, something like that. Using some type of animation to say, hey, this is where we want you to click. This is the spot that's going to help solve your problem, achieve your goal. So what that's called is a hover color. And these are some just examples of that. So normally it would be in the image, normally the call to action would be this shade of, you can call it turquoise, green, whatever. But once someone hovers over that, it has the slightest variation to the color. And then once someone clicks it again, that it changes colors the last time before you go to the next page. So that's something fun you can use just to reaffirm that visitors and users are on the right track on your website. Moving on.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm supposed to talk a little bit about this as far as like your sitemap or navigation and really encouraging people to click through your menu, because what you've highlighted in the top is likely some of the most important pages that you want people to visit, right, on your website. As far as giving your users a comprehensive roadmap to everything that you've put into your website, really simple, clear labels for information. Your about page should be something like about or about us or who we are. It's not ambiguous as to what that page is, because when people click to that page, they're looking for a bio about you, about your company, or learning more about your team, right? So you don't want to lead them astray, right? Additionally, being concise in the options that you give users can sometimes be helpful, especially, a very large navigation with so many different options doesn't really give clear guidance to your users as far as maybe what's most important for them to visit. And ultimately, the way that you design your navigation and how it lives and how it functions should be intuitive to, what is on most websites, and here's how you can change it a little bit to make it unique without losing that functionality and familiarity. But we are going to talk a little bit more about intuitive design in our next webinar. So I'm going to leave that there. And next up, we've got just a little true or false, keep you on your toes. Do you think true or false if you can use analytics to improve your user flow? So if you want to take a quick second, you can say true or false in the chat.
Or you could think it to yourself.
For the sake of time, I'm going to go ahead and let you know that it's true. It's absolutely true. And we've already mentioned it a little bit, but this is certainly another tool in your toolbox when it comes to understanding maybe what users are already doing or how users are already interacting on your site. So Google Analytics offers a behavior flow. You can look at past ways that users have, taken specific paths throughout your site and understand maybe what's the most important of those flows, what's most common, and do they match up to what your ideal user flow is. So there's that. And then additionally, Spencer had shown an example of it earlier, and this is from a website called Hotjar. This shows a heat map of where users are interacting most on your website. And it can be a great way too of just where their eyes are drawn, where they're clicking through. So that's just some additional past user data that can really inform, what are users already doing on my website? And if I want that to be different or my calls to action aren't clear, what are some other tools that I can use to adjust that and make those be the hot spots on the heat map and the top user flow in Google Analytics?
Definitely. And yeah, you can definitely access your past user data in Google Analytics. Your site should have that implemented. But I do believe Hotjar for the heat maps, that's something you actually embed onto your site on each page. And I believe there are free and paid versions. So, but definitely encourage you to check it out. It's super interesting. So through the link in the chat, if you are interested in checking it out.
Yeah, for sure. And there are other tools out there. That's just one that, we're familiar with in the industry. This slide may look a little confusing on first glance, but I did want to quickly talk about, one directional flows. And what I mean by that is your flow should have that end goal in mind. So when we think of or refer to a sales funnel, oftentimes that's displayed in a funnel shape, and that's for a reason, right? It's really, here's all the information in the beginning, but ultimately you're guiding your users down to the single point of contact, likely again, but give users too many options or not enough options, not clear guidance as to what they're going to be looking for, then they're just going to keep going in circles and they're not going to find more information about you. They're not going to find where your contact info is. And ultimately, you're going to lose them as a potential customer. So just be really mindful when you're creating those flows of your end goal and working back and using some of the tools that Spencer mentioned earlier of really mapping out, okay, if they do this, I want them to go here. And, 2 steps later, they're getting in touch with me. So think about that as well.
For sure. So now let's think about other entry points. So whatever the landing pages that people are visiting on your site. So as I mentioned before, your homepage is definitely the most frequent entry point, but there are other places folks can enter your website. It could be a blog, gallery, services, a different landing page, etc. So really the goal in this is to keep your site visitor flowing through their past success, avoid dead ends. If you're on a road trip and there's a road closed ahead, doesn't end the road trip altogether. You are offered an alternate path called a detour, which will keep you on your way to a journey. So that's our goal here, is to not lead people to a dead end. It's to reroute traffic or create a detour. So options for this, you could make sure you have your calls to action on every single page, regardless of what page they end on. If they're on Meet Our Team, make sure you have something there for them to click on to continue that flow back, but also make sure that it's kind of redirecting them back in a way where it's going to help them reach their overarching goals. So add some call to actions to the bottom service pages, any page. Internal links are a great way. Every blog piece of content page on your website should have some internal links. So maybe it's a blog, it's at the end, if you're interested in learning more about this topic, check this out, or check out our service related to this offering, so on and so forth. Another option is going to be adding some footer options to your most valuable pages. I've got some examples right there. You got our process, story, so on and so forth, just really changing them out. Another way to do it would be to add a side form. So right away, if they're on a service page, this gives them an option to be like, yes, this is what I want. And even if their main goal is to get in contact with you, they've still identified the service that they are interested in, and they have the option to fill out that contact form right there. Here's another example of related service offerings. So maybe they get to that page and it's like, no, not exactly what I'm looking for. Offering them other options, like maybe this is what they're looking for. So really helping them flow along to find what they're looking for. Last but not least is, let's say someone subscribes to your newsletter, or in this case, they signed up or subscribed to our webinar series. Not just leaving them at a thank you page, but giving them two or three, it doesn't matter, two other options to continue that flow. So schedule a website audit, that's in relation to what the thank you page is about. And it's going to be a high value offering because it's valuable for the end user and it's valuable for us. So last but not least, check out Resource Center, just other ways to establish valuable content to them. So those are some tips that you can change dead ends into just detours to get them back on their path to a goal.
Yeah, and that's actually a really great starting example for distinguishing between, what a campaign flow might be versus, your overall user flow. So I've got up here too an example of our webinar series, right? That's a very specific campaign. The pages are designed with a specific user flow of, here's all of the webinars we're offering, and then there are pages, should you be interested in a specific webinar topic, here's more about that specific webinar, the details surrounding it, and where to sign up. And so that's really, when we talk about a campaign flow, and oftentimes it's going to include, its own starter points, maybe outside of your website. But Spencer, you can go to the next slide too. These campaigns are designed to have their own user flow, and you've got specific campaign goals that you're looking to reach, and you're also tracking them and separately from your standard contact form submissions, right? However, campaigns are meant to support, the permanent features or tenets of your website. So not only are the landing pages similar to, your overall user experience in terms of the branding's the same, the call to action buttons look similar, And you're not necessarily letting them hit a dead end. Ultimately, a campaign is designed to bring you back to some of your longer term overall goals. And so you bring them back to other pages of your website so that they can continue through that journey. So we've got a quick summary for you here. This is, just a really simple list of everything we've talked about with you. So, absolutely go back and review this on your own time, but just really covering again what user flow is, what mapping it out looks like, some tools available for you, and then really making sure you've distinguished between some other entry points, whether it be landing pages and specific campaigns versus, coming to just your homepage on the website.
Definitely. And before we get into what's next, I suppose we could take a few seconds to answer a couple questions right off the bat. So one that we had kind of I saw when we were talking about past user data is, and I'll let Aaron answer this one. How long of a sample size should you look from when you're looking at your analytics when it comes to tracking past be it user data or behavior?
Yeah, for sure. And it's a cheater answer to say it really depends, but it does. I think it's important to maybe look at all time data, but if you've had your website for 15 years, that's a lot of data, and likely your business and also your audience has evolved significantly over time. So I think looking at a year at a time is really insightful and a good place to start, just on a baseline level. I also think too, if you've made a significant change to your website and or business, taking that point where you set your new website live, or you made a significant shift away from a specific service and you're focusing on something else, measuring from that point of change on, or maybe comparing the time before that change and after, can be really insightful too, to understand how that change in particular affected some of your other numbers.
Yeah, and that goes back into the A/B testing aspect that you were talking about earlier. So
Absolutely. Spencer, I did see another question too related to kind of the homepage and how maybe your homepage ties into your overall user flow.
Yeah, so your homepage is going to be the kind of starting point for most of your visitors. So definitely is important to ensure that your call to action is that it's clear and obvious what that first step is that they should be taking. We've got that 3-step billboard test that we didn't put everyone through this webinar. You're welcome. But really making sure that once they get to your website, that they are reaffirmed that you can help them achieve their goals. That's where it comes to the call to actions, making sure that's obvious, the services, the credibility. So reaffirming that you can achieve their goals, that you do have the expertise, and helping them guide, here's the next step you should take. So really offering them that. And then if they're not interested, as it got back to the secondary call to action as well, which is that detour, which eventually they'll get back on track. So it's kind of what we've got in terms of questions. If you've got any more, feel free to throw them in. We've got a couple more small little tidbits to cover here, but feel free to throw any questions in before then. So as I mentioned before, free website audit, which essentially this is taking a high level look at all aspects of your website. So some SEO in terms of how well you are doing in terms of generating organic traffic, homepage audit, and then a overall website and social media content audit. So looking at those few things from a super high level, identifying some actionable items that you can take to really get the most out of your website. If you're interested in that, I'll throw the link down in the chat again. You'll be scheduling a meeting with me. So just throw in the note that you are doing a website audit and we'll get that on the schedule. So last but not least, what's coming up next? So we're finishing off our website focus section of our best practices series with the best practice of designing a user-friendly site. So really, as we mentioned today, user flow, it all goes back to designing that website with the end user in mind. So we're really going to tackle some design fundamental aspects that you can incorporate to your own site that will cultivate great user experiences. And then we're going to finish off the year, rounding it off with best practice of email marketing. Email marketing is extremely underutilized compared to some, let's say, social media, but at the end of the day, it's a great way to push content in front of your audience and provide them valuable content that they might not have known about if they were just, hanging out on your Facebook, or they might have missed something. Just another great way. And we're going to tackle 3 different webinars and 3 different topics there. So stay tuned for that. But if you do have any questions, we'll stay in here for a few more minutes. But if you want to reach out to us individually with any questions, feel free to email us. Our emails are spencer.bard@keystoneclick.com and aaron.jordan@keystoneclick.com. And I will stop the recording now if I can find the button. There.